The House Committee on Natural Resources, Environment, Tourism, and Outdoor Recreation will come to order. Would the clerk please take attendance?
Chair Putsky.
Here.
Representative Hill.
Here.
Shannon.
Present.
Arvid.
Here.
McFall.
Here.
Pies.
Present.
Martin.
Here.
Preston. Shriver.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have 9 members present. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Representative Pies moves to approve the minutes from the previous meeting on September 21st. Hearing no objection, the minutes are approved. So first up, we are going to take testimony on House Bill 4359, which is sponsored by Representative Brayback. So at this time, I invite Rep. Brayback to come forward, and if there's anyone else coming with her, I believe she has John Fournier, the Deputy City Manager from Ann Arbor. The floor is yours.
Good morning, Chairwoman, members of the committee. Thanks so much for having us here this morning. We're testifying, as the chair said, on House Bill 4359. What this bill does is that it repeals the act that preempts local communities from creating ordinances that would institute a ban on auxiliary containers. So simply put, this is an issue of local control. This bill allows local municipalities to make their own decisions about auxiliary containers, and that can include bags, cups, bottles, and other packaging used to transport food. Typically, though, the focus is on single-use plastic bags. Bans and restrictions on the use of plastic bags are widespread, not only throughout our country, but also the world. 21 other states allow their local municipalities to enforce bans and fees on on plastic bags, including our neighbors in Illinois. In fact, 16 of those 21 states actually have those local municipalities, cities, towns, or counties that have elected to impose bans on single-use plastic bags. 10 states now have statewide bans. To be clear, this bill does not require any communities to ban plastic bags or auxiliary containers. It merely gives folks the option to. I'd also like to add that in 2016, local municipalities did, in fact, have the capability of making these decisions for themselves. So let's talk a little bit about single-use plastic bags. They are non-biodegradable sources of pollution that scientists say can take hundreds of years or even millennium to break down. Reducing bags can mitigate harmful impacts on our oceans, our rivers, lakes, forests, and wildlife that inhabit them. It can also relieve pressure on landfills and waste management. And municipalities should be given the opportunity to regulate the use of certain plastics should they wish to. I want to share a little bit with you about my experience, particularly with this. In 2016, we wanted to do this in Washtenaw County. Solid waste problems, particularly with plastic bags. We were seeing jamming equipment at our local recycling facilities. The bags were blowing away, and we saw the litter throughout our community. So when I was a member of the county commission in 2016, we tried to enact a ban, and in fact, we voted 6-2 to impose a 10-cent fee on consumers for every paper or plastic bag that they received in a big box store. I just want to share a little bit about how we broke those down to 80% of those fees would have gone to our county solid waste management plan, which called for an aggressive program to reduce waste going into landfills and increasing recycling. Grocers would then have retained the remaining 20% to develop and provide educational resources to customers, the public, and employees about the ordinance, the ecological benefits of reusable bags, and proper management and recycling of disposable bags. We also allowed for an exemption for any resident receiving assistance, which is important. So county officials plan to enforce this and these local regulations that would cut down on the use of those bags, and we're excited that, and we're going to start doing that Earth Day of the following year. Unfortunately, shortly after we did that, the state legislature passed a law precluding local government entities from enforcing such bans. So it effectively stripped our ability to do that, and we had to give up on that. But by repealing the ban on plastic bags, House Bill 4359 empowers our local communities to fight for a more sustainable future like we would have wanted in Washtenaw County. As a state, I think we should be encouraging all municipalities to allow themselves the ability to do this. And I just want to reiterate, I think it's clear, but want to reiterate that this is a bill about local control. It merely offers the opportunity for our municipalities to decide that if this is a value in their communities. I want to thank you again. I'm going to pass it over to our Deputy City Manager from Ann Arbor.
Thank you very much, Representative Braybeck. Thank you to the chair and the committee for allowing me to speak today. As the representative said, in the city of Ann Arbor and in Washtenaw County, this type of control is very important to us. Both government entities have passed plastic bag bans that we hope can become effective when this legislation passes here in Lansing. These plastic bags are made from non-renewable resources like natural gas and petroleum. They do not break down, dissolve, they do not biodegrade. They gather and accumulate in our parks and streams, and simply put, they cause problems for us. They're intended to be disposed of, and they are disposed of, and they end up accumulating in natural spaces and in our utility infrastructure, most importantly, in the city of Ann Arbor. Something that hasn't been talked a lot around this issue is that extreme weather events have become more extreme in the state of Michigan. The most extreme rainstorms that come across our state drop 40% more precipitation than they did several decades ago. And what that means is our stormwater infrastructure is critically important today, and it must function very, very well. But plastic bags are very problematic for stormwater infrastructure. They can get washed down into storm drains, and they can clog them up, which causes flooding, it causes property damage, and it can cause property loss. And so in addition to the presence of this pollution in our parks and in our streets and in our neighborhoods, it being unsightly and it being problematic because these are fossil fuel derived products, in addition to that, there are serious stormwater impacts as well for municipalities like Ann Arbor and for the infrastructure that we have to maintain. And so I want to hit on another point that the representative brought up. There are more than 500 municipalities across the United States that have banned plastic bags. Places like Lawrence, Kansas, places like the entire state of Maine, right? Places that have done this successfully, where retailers have adjusted, where the local economy continues to be healthy. We can do that here in Michigan too. We can create this type of local control in Michigan and ban plastic bags, and if these other places are making it succeed, we are good enough to make it succeed too. We hear that we don't want to create, a patchwork of regulations across the state, but the reality is that zoning laws differ from municipality to municipality. Health regulations differ. Development standards differ, transportation standards differ. All of these things differ from community to community because we value self-determination across our municipalities in this state. Plastic bags should be no different than any of these other issues. It is important that there be local control on it, and I would urge passage of this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you both. Are there any questions for either Rep. Brayback or for John? Rep. Shannon?
Well, thank you so much for your testimony today. I remember when this all went down, and it definitely is a local control issue. I spoke out against, limiting, having the state get involved in local issues. If this was just a plastic band bag, and that's mostly what you guys were talking about, but they're under the auxiliary containers, there's a lot of other things that I think would be problematic for businesses. And so I have some concerns with that. If we're just talking plastic bands, I think I could get behind it. These other auxiliary containers, that's a bit of an issue.
May I respond? Sure. So thank you, Representative. I appreciate it. I mean, in my research on this, the reality is that we only have 6 states that have banned plastic straws, and we have LA County and New York, unless you request it, has banned single-use containers. And so, yes, the term is broad. The application of it has not been as broad. Again, it would just allow those local municipalities, if this fit in their master plan or was a value for them, to be able to do that. But this is the reality in terms of other containers.
Rep. Pies?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It occurred to me that this also might reduce tonnage fees in your waste disposal, which would mean that you would have lesser fees and taxes for your taxpayers. Would that be,
That-
just,
That is potentially true. It's an issue that we'd have to study to understand what the real impact would be on our solid waste stream, but that is potentially true.
okay. And my other question, thank you, Madam Chair. How is this working? What's the success rate in other states?
So again, we have, I mean, in terms of the numbers, you know, we have 12 states that have plastic bag bans completely, and as the deputy city manager mentioned, over 500 municipalities. I was looking at, just the list went on and on and on of municipalities that have decided to take this stance in their communities. And so to the deputy city manager's point, the local communities have been able to manage it. Their economy is still successful. They're not shutting down. Their cities, townships, counties aren't shutting down. And so I think that this is something that, again, we leave up to the locals, and they decide for their community, and has come with success. Sure.
Any other questions? Rep. Shriver.
Thank you. You're saying that this is correlated with healthy local economies. Do you have data to support how using the law to increase the cost of groceries is helpful for local economies?
This doesn't increase the cost of groceries.
So this
Groceries are the same amount.
So this is in reference to the 2016 repeal that dealt with the Washtenaw County Commissioner exerting a 10-cent fee on plastic bags.
But that's
And
not on groceries.
So how is this not going to impact groceries? Do you not ever use a plastic bag when you buy groceries?
I mean, some people don't. I mean, it's, again, up to the individual. It doesn't make the groceries themselves more expensive. If folks decide that they want to go to a store and they don't bring any reusable bags, that's a decision that they're making. Also, again, the local communities decide if there is a fee. So again, it's up to the local municipalities if they want to impose a fee for the use of a single-use plastic bag or not.
So my question is, do you have data correlated with this supporting healthy economies in local communities?
We can get that for you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Are there any other questions at this time? All right, thank you both very much. Next up, testifying virtually, we have Tim Minotis, who is the Legislative and Political Coordinator for the Michigan chapter of the Sierra Club. And going forward, folks, we do have a pretty stacked agenda, so if we can keep testimony to roughly 2 minutes, I would appreciate it. Tim, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Chair Pohotsky and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify before you all this morning. On behalf of our 150,000 members and supporters across the state of Michigan, the Sierra Club supports House Bill 4359. Michigan has a $22.8 billion tourism and outdoor recreation industry that is, at risk due to increasing levels of plastic pollution in our Great Lakes, rivers, streams, and more than 22 million pounds of plastic end up in the Great Lakes every year, really causing tremendous strain on human, animal, and ecosystem health. A plastic bag takes up about 1,000 years to photodegrade, which in many cases it doesn't actually break down, but instead turns into microplastics. And we've seen from a recent study done by the University of Toronto, which found that about 90% of water samples taken over the last 10 years from the Great Lakes contain microplastic levels that are unsafe for wildlife. And I'm not going to repeat what Representative Brayback mentioned about the local impacts from recycling streams, clogging wastewater systems, sewer systems, etc. We agree. We've seen that ourselves by studying this issue. But what we are seeing also across the country are retailers and grocery stores doing what they can to eliminate or restrict the use of single-use plastic bags. There are solutions out there. Local communities are partnering and even working with their state governments on efforts to reduce plastic bag use. Some have implemented bans or taxes on disposable plastic bags used by customers at the point of sale, or some sort of creative, hybrid model we have seen. And we've also seen local communities also considering equity impacts from a policy point of view. We have seen some local areas take a portion of the revenue from the tax and use it to provide reusable bags to recipients on SNAP or WIC benefits. Additionally, local governments can utilize the revenue to support programs that aim to reduce environmental waste and mitigate pollution and litter, while also enhancing capacity to address other sustainability-related issues. And prior to 1979, single-use plastic shopping bags were not used in the U.S. in U.S. retailers and grocery stores. So this is nothing new to the United States. Plastic pollution is one of the greatest pollution issues of our time. Several states, as we have heard, have introduced legislation that bans single-use plastic. We've seen over a dozen states adopting such bans, and hundreds of communities across the country also doing what they can to reduce this waste. And so, this bill today is a step in the right direction. It is a small step, but it is a step in the right direction to starting to reduce our plastic waste here in the state. And again, furthermore, up until 2016, this was the law. We are just returning local control over to an important community decision that was removed during Governor Snyder's tenure. This is the right thing to do. It makes sense, and we ask for your all support for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Are there any questions for Tim? All right, thank you very much. Next up, we will hear from Chris Semrenick, the State Government Affairs Coordinator for the Michigan League of Conservation Voters.
Thank you, Chair Pohutsky and members of the committee. My name is Chris Semrenick, the State Government Affairs Coordinator for the Michigan League of Conservation Voters. I'll try not to repeat what had Tim said, but very similar along the lines of, this is a really important issue and a good step in the right direction for many reasons. As we've heard before, the use of plastic bags and a lot of single-use receptacles cause not only environmental issues, they cause health issues, and it's also a big issue of, local and public nuisance. We've heard, obviously getting clogged in infrastructure, stormwater infrastructure, but we've also seen in a lot of studies the significant cost impacts on locals when plastic bags that a lot of folks think do recycle end up in a lot of those materials recovery facilities. When that happens, it can ensnarl in a lot of the infrastructure that they use, causing several days of either being shut down and losing out on a lot of profit there. So that's just a couple of the examples that it's a nuisance at the local level. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention all the environmental impacts coming from MLCV. But as Tim had mentioned, 22 million pounds of plastic ending up in the Great Lakes every year. I think Michigan is uniquely vulnerable to the use of single-use plastic bags for that reason. To elaborate on that fact as well, Lake Michigan, I would say one of the more popular of the Great Lakes, receiving tourism, and obviously that money going right back to the state. There's been studies that 5,000 metric tons of plastic end up in Lake Michigan alone. So that's just one of our 5 Great Lakes, and plastic entering those waters. And really, we alluded to the microplastics you've heard, but there's a lot of health issues that go along with that as well. We see the microfibers and the microplastics coming out of these bags. As we know, they don't break down. They're not biodegradable. And those through, the life cycle end up into our bodies every single day. Whether it's a product you use or the food you eat, you will inevitably be ingesting a lot of those plastics. And there's been studies out of the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences showing that a lot of the chemicals used in the manufacturing process become endocrine disruptors, carcinogens, and you see reproductive health issues, cancer, infertility, a multitude of health issues that can be caused directly related to the ingestion of the microplastics that come from this usage. So again, I'll keep it brief for the chair and the rest of the committee, but we commend Representative Brayback for bringing this legislation forward. We do think it's a good step in the right direction and giving the power back to local communities to be able to control this issue if they see fit and seeing it fit into their local economy. So I'll welcome any questions, but thank you for the time.
there any questions for Chris? All right, thank you very
Thank you.
much. Next up, testifying in opposition to the bill is John McNamara from the Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association.
Thank you, Chair Pohutsky, members of the committee, for taking to hear my testimony. My name is John McNamara, and I'm here on behalf of Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association to offer our opposition to House Bill 4359. I think obviously, we've heard those who are supporting this, but simply from a multi-unit operator standpoint, having to potentially have different containers at every single restaurant is an administrative nightmare that I believe simply would not work for the industry. But I'm also here today in an industry who relies on takeout and therefore relies on takeout containers. In a 2023 State of the Industry survey, 74% of restaurant meals were consumed via takeout. That's a 13% increase from February 2020, which is just weeks before Michigan's first but not last indoor dining shutdown. Because of this trend, many restaurants have transitioned to being exclusively takeout. For example, one of my favorite restaurants here in Lansing, Nang Myanmar, is exclusively takeout in the post-COVID world as he transitioned his dining room into a grocery store. This is a trend that was happening before COVID, but was accelerated. More and more restaurants are providing two specific but different purposes. They are maximizing convenience for quick weekday meals via takeout, or they're providing an experience for dinner, such as a restaurant like Prime and Proper in downtown Detroit. This is a trend the industry expects to continue. Additionally, for some, restaurants are their main source of food. Rising prices on everyday items such as eggs, fry oil, and ground beef has already forced most, if not all, restaurants to raise prices. In Michigan alone, 51% of meals consumed are prepared by a restaurant. If more expensive containers are mandated, it will likely require prices increase that could negatively impact lower income individuals or citizens located in food deserts who depend on takeout as their source of food. The restaurant industry welcomes and is part of the movement toward more sustainable products, which is why the National Restaurant Association launched their Conserve program, which helps restaurants reduce their carbon footprint. Again, thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
We have a question from Representative Arbit.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
MRLA has members all across the state, is that correct?
Correct.
And do you currently, and do your members currently lobby or have conversations with local township trustees, city council members about local policies that impact their business?
We do. For example, we have a Detroit-specific Detroit Restaurant and Lodging Association that focuses that, but we have local groups we work with all over the state.
Okay. And so if House Bill 4359 is signed into law, empowering local municipalities to regulate, plastic bags and other containers, could not your members lobby local township trustees and city council members in a manner that is consistent with their interest in the area?
Absolutely they could,
Okay.
but obviously that
Thank you,
that
Madam
doesn't
Chair.
mean that they're going to get what they need.
Vice Chair Hill.
I have a question. We, in Marquette, we have a very active styrofoam-free group that I have been at meetings where there were literally 45 people in attendance, that's a big meeting in Marquette. And so there are a number of our restaurants have, with the assistance of these folks, moved to compostable compostable boxes instead of styrofoam boxes because of our residents were actively asking for it. And this was people of all ages, young, old, literally there were 45 people in the room. And I'm sorry, this might not be a question you can answer, but it occurs to me at this moment. Would compostable clamshell boxes be considered single use, or are they, where would they fall?
I think that's probably a question for the sponsor of someone with more background. I'm not 100% sure on that.
Rep. Shriver.
I just wanted to ask what you were going to say before you were cut off earlier in response to my colleague's question.
Well, I was just going to say that obviously you can lobby a local government. That doesn't necessarily mean the local government is going to agree with your position on the cause.
Okay. Are there any additional questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Amy Drum from the Michigan Retailers Association speaking in opposition to the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee, for the opportunity to share our concerns and comments on House Bill 4359. My name is Amy Drum, and I'm here to share the concerns we have on behalf of the thousands of retailers Michigan Retailers Association represents who would be negatively impacted if PA 389 of 2016 is repealed. The question before us today is not whether bags or containers are good or bad, but rather who should have the jurisdiction to regulate what retailers can offer their customers to transport their purchases home. We firmly believe the state is the most appropriate place for these conversations to occur. While it may sound silly, these policies can be much more complex than they appear on the surface, and local policies can easily have unintended consequences, including a disproportionate impact on disadvantaged communities. In 2016, what we saw happening around the country was alarming, and we wanted to make sure that Michigan would avoid a patchwork of differing local regulations on bags and containers. In states without a similar law or statewide policy, the number of different rules to follow creates an actual nightmare for retailers. Massachusetts has 106 different local bag ordinances or policies. Pennsylvania has 23, Maryland has 15, and California, while they adopted a statewide law in 2014, they allowed the 149 previously adopted local ordinances or policies to supersede that state law. These are not just bans, or the same ban or the same fee across every jurisdiction. They may be different fees, collected differently on different schedules, and include different types of definitions of bags and apply to different types of businesses. As you all know, words and definitions matter. Many of our local communities have not fully considered how the policy could impact low-income customers who rely on public transportation or walk home in inclement weather, or the impact on residents who utilize food assistance benefits when the federal government prohibits paying bag or container fees with WIC or SNAP. They've not considered how it will add costs and compliance challenges to small retailers operating in multiple jurisdictions who may not have the same access to purchase alternative bags or containers if they can afford them, or how it could impact food safety related to safe temperature holding or keeping cooked and uncooked items separated. There's also the consideration of how a broad definition of bag could even impact bags used to separate medication at the pharmacy, affect accurate weights and measures standards for produce and deli items, or prevent purchases of trash bags intended to be used at home. Not every local community is equipped or prepared to go through the same thorough vetting process state legislation receives. Because these policies are complex, the state, not local units of government, is in the best position to consider regulations on this subject matter. Local governments can and should address littering policies, recycling and solid waste management, as we've heard, all mentioned earlier today, none of which is currently prevented by the current law. That's why we respectfully ask you to continue only regulating these items at the state level by rejecting House Bill 4359. Thank you, and with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Amy. I had a couple of questions. So when we talk about a patchwork of different regulations and the challenges that presents for retailers, so I live in Livonia, no retailers, so like none of our larger ones, so like Kroger, Meijer, are permitted to sell liquor. But if I go across the street to the Meijer that is in Northville, they sell liquor. Why is that not an encumberment that we aren't discussing? Like, it seems like retailers are already dealing with the patchwork of different regulations across municipalities, so why is this one so onerous and different when everyone seems to be coping just fine with the other ones?
So some of those are rare. That's a good example, and I appreciate the question. You know, that puts a really hard impact on some of our stores who are trying to meet on very thin profit margins. You know, it's hard to compete when your neighboring community offers something like liquor and you are not able to. And we've heard that some stores are unable to move into areas that are food deserts because they need that profit margin to offset the cost of running the business in that community. So with all due respect, we would actually prefer that those decisions be kept at the state level. Obviously, not everything can be, and so we are not here to discuss every possible option of ordinances today. But again, our general consensus is that we believe the state should be the one to handle more of these business regulations at that level because it keeps it simpler for the business to operate. and compete with their neighboring entities.
Okay. And the other thing that you mentioned that I was very interested in was the idea of making sure that food safety is being considered and keeping cooked and uncooked items separate. I struggle to think of the last time I went to a grocery store where there was an actual cashier there. It's all been basically taken down to just self-checkout. So was that a concern? Was food safety a concern then in making sure that customers knew to keep cooked and uncooked food separate? Because no one has ever intervened when I've been trying to bag my own groceries at any of those retail locations. So like why is food safety a concern in this realm, but not in other cost-saving measures that retailers have taken on?
Great question. So my comment to that is more specific to things like produce bags and bags offered by the meat section. If you're going to keep your products in those bags so that they don't contaminate other items in your cart, not necessarily the bagging at the checkout lane or the self-checkout lane.
So we care about food safety partway through the grocery trip, but not at the end.
We care about food safety through the entire grocery trip, certainly, but you're offered the opportunity, if the ordinances are worded improperly, they can include those other produce bags or bags that you'd use to separate items as you're going through the store. But certainly it's up to the consumer in part to do their job and to know what they feel safe and comfortable doing.
Including maybe bringing reusable bags?
They could. They also need to remember to wash those bags to keep them safe.
Yep, great, thank you. Are there other questions? Rep. Arbit?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You've said a number of times that you are really concerned about the jurisdiction piece of this policy and this legislation. I'm curious as to whether or not, if this state, if this bill was sort of substituted and amendments were made and basically we decided to go in a direction that the state was going to ban all plastic bags, all styrofoam containers and receptacles, and is going to put a mandate that all such containers and receptacles would have to be from recycled sources or other, materials that are deemed by this body to be, more friendly to the environment, or maybe even put a numerical threshold limitation, or a weight limitation, some sort of alternative policy that was still putting mandate and a regulation on current practices. Would that be preferable to you and your members than a jurisdiction, than changing the jurisdiction of this policy?
Well, that consideration is not before us today, and certainly the details of.
I'm wondering, but I'm asking you whether your members, would prefer. I'm testing this idea that your only issue here is the jurisdiction piece. That's what I really want to know.
That is absolutely our focus on our concern, in that we believe the conversation should be happening at the state level, but there isn't a policy that we're considering right now before us. But we could certainly have that conversation with you.
Okay, thank you.
Rep. Pies?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kind of two-part and following up a little bit on Representative Shriver's concern about food costs. Local Kroger in my city had been offering 10% off your grocery when you use plastic bags. So I think they're concerned in part about trying to be environmentally aware. And also just another statement, I guess. The city I live in had to stop our recycling service because we found that people weren't cleaning their recyclables adequately, and things appeared to be ending up at the dump instead of being recycled. Also, I have a friend who's a former city council person in Sterling Heights, and he had gone to a recycling conference out in the west side of the state some years back, and where he learned about what was being recycled, what isn't, and it had to do with profit margins and equipment failures. And so they had pretty much plastic bags weren't being recycled. Even certain types of glass had stopped because they need to make a profit. So some cities aren't able to have recycling programs to address this. I think that's mostly what I'd like to say. And that it seems to me that some retailers are, in fact, trying to be more mindful. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? All right, thank you. Members, if we could keep comments to a minimum and just address questions, we do have a lot more business to get through. Next up, speaking in opposition, is Carolyn Lethan and Anne-Marie Treglia. Carolyn is from the Michigan Manufacturers, and Anne-Marie is from DART. And if we could keep comments to about, I know there's two of you, so like 4 minutes, that'd be great. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, Madam Chair and members of the committee, I'm Caroline Lethan, Director of Environmental and Regulatory Policy for the Michigan Manufacturers Association. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Anne-Marie Treglia. She is the Global Director of Government Affairs for DART Container Corporation, a world leader in manufacturing cups and containers based just south of us in Mason, Michigan. Thank you for the opportunity to share MMA and DART's perspective on House Bill 4359. MMA members such as DART support the communities in which they live and operate by providing quality jobs, offering a wide range of products, and supporting sustainability and recycling programs. As such, MMA respectfully opposes House Bill 4359 in that it lays a framework for local units of government to ban Michigan-made products. With that, I will hand it over to Anne-Marie. Excuse me.
Thank you. Can people hear me? Okay. So my name's Anne-Marie Treglia. I'm the Global Director of Government Affairs for DART Container. DART respectfully opposes 4359. For those of you who are not familiar with DART, we are a family-owned business founded in 1960 down the road in Mason, Michigan. We have locations throughout the United States, Mexico, and Canada, but Michigan is our home state. Our Michigan footprint includes our Mason campus that houses manufacturing, corporate offices, a recycling center, and an innovation center. Our ink plant is based in Holt, Michigan, and we have a dedicated Michigan-based sales team. Over 1,900 of your fellow Michiganders work for DART in Michigan. As mentioned, these jobs, all 1,900, will be at risk if this is repealed, and I will explain in my testimony why we feel this way. As mentioned, DART makes the food containers, otherwise referred to as auxiliary containers. Our product portfolio includes items made from plastics, paper, and compostable materials. I have submitted written testimony to the record and will take just time to focus solely on the negative impact repealing preemption will bring to Michigan and jobs based on our experience in other locations. The loss of Michigan jobs is a real concern to DART. Bans create a patchwork of regulations that our customers must navigate and comply with. As our customers are constrained in what they are legally allowed to use, our ability to supply them is disrupted and revenue is impacted. Lost income impacts the company's bottom line, which leads to tough decisions on a variety of issues, including hiring and retaining employees. This year, we have closed 3 production facilities, one in Washington State, one in England, and one in Illinois. And by the end of the year, our Canada facility will be down 80 positions since August of 2022. This is a 40% reduction of the plant's workplace in Canada. Again, this is all due to negative legislation bringing in bans. Some people may ask, rather than shut facilities, why didn't DART just invest in new equipment at these locations to make new products? There are many factors that go into plant closure decisions. An important consideration is, are more bans coming and what will they target? This unknown deters a business from investing millions in switching to other machinery for concern that their next product will also be banned. It's not just DART's jobs that will be impacted, but also Michigan-based vendors with whom we work. In 2022, DART paid over $90 million to Michigan-based vendors. However, if our product offerings are forced to be reduced due to legislation, this will impact the Michigan-based vendors with whom we partner. In closing, thank you for your time, and I will turn it back to Caroline.
So briefly, I'd also like to note that MMA supported the Part 115 amendments that were passed during lame duck last year. Those were focused on waste management planning. The amendments are currently being implemented by EGLE to provide a broader approach to handling end-of-life materials, including solid waste and recyclables. Broadly speaking, the package's goal was to divert waste away from landfills through the creation of robust recycling programs, and such statewide policies are important to support the sustainable management of consumer goods. We also support the ability for the local levels of government to enforce their local litter laws. And with that, we appreciate the opportunity to testify and welcome questions.
I had a question. You said, I know England, there were shutdowns, and I know that there were issues in Illinois and Washington. Is that correct?
Correct.
Were those municipal bans or were those statewide bans?
That's a great question. So typically how this occurs, they'll start at the local level, and you'll see a ban pop up in one city. We'll see, and it's not always the same material that's being targeted, but given we make such a range of products, we're obviously being impacted. What happens then, these start to accumulate, and then there's pressure on the state to then do a ban. So what we saw in Canada is eventually there was a federal ban on several of our products, which we made up there. So we aren't running those lines anymore, and unfortunately those folks are now without a job. What we saw in Washington State is they did do a full-on foam ban, which was the main product at that facility.
Sure.
So unfortunately, again, there was originally over 60-some people at that facility, and that was closed this April.
But to answer my question, those are
sorry.
both statewide bans?
No, so they started as local bans. So to your point, yes, they started as local bans that eventually put pressure on the state to move to a state-level ban. I
And
hope
those
that-
facilities closed after statewide bans, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure we got
Yep,
the timeline
yep.
correct. Are there additional questions?
Can I just add to, I'm sorry, I
Yeah,
should have
no, by
clarified
all
one
means.
second. So Illinois did not have a statewide ban. That came from bans throughout the country, because there's over 400 and some bans on all sorts of products.
Okay.
Because of the fact that we sourced from that facility, we weren't selling the same amounts we used to, and unfortunately, a decision was made that that plant had to shut down.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. All right, seeing no further questions, thank you both very much. Next up, we have Barb Farah on behalf of Zach Taylor with American Recyclable Plastic Bag Association.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's not often I sit in for a client or that I give testimony at committee anymore. So I think that really there has been a letter provided by Zach Taylor. He apologizes for not being able to be here. He is out of the country and was going to come in by Zoom, but we thought the letter would be best as this is testimony only. I think all of the points have been covered. We have done some polling just recently on this issue, and recent polling in the state found that across all demographics, 73.6% of residents oppose an additional tax on the use of bags, straws, utensils, or containers in stores or restaurants. 76.5% of the respondents agreed that putting a tax on bags and other containers is an unnecessary burden when consumers are continuing to struggle from inflation. We will share those numbers with you and the bill sponsor.
I appreciate it, but to be clear, the legislation before us today is not about imposing a tax.
We understand that,
Okay,
yes.
great. Are there questions for Barb? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And last but not least, testifying in support of the bill is Samantha Pickering, and I believe we also have Charlotte Jameson, but I'm not, okay, great, they're coming up together. From the Michigan Environmental Council.
Hi, Charlotte Jameson, the Chief Policy Officer with the Michigan Environmental Council. Thank you so much, Chair Pohutsky and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify today in support of this critical legislation. I will turn it over to Sam for our testimony.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and rest of the committee members. My name is Samantha Pickering, and I'm the Public and Environmental Health Policy Coordinator at Michigan Environmental Council. And this important piece of legislation will repeal the ban on local government banning or regulating the use of auxiliary containers, which we've talked about already, includes a variety of different types of plastic materials. So repealing this ban is, as we've discussed earlier too, is beneficial for the health of the environment as well as the health of the individuals. There are a lot of issues that we're still learning about and researching about and how it affects human health. But as described earlier as well, plastic is an indestructible material. It does not biodegrade. It does not decompose. It breaks apart over time into smaller and smaller pieces known as microplastics and nanoplastics. And those tiny little pieces, we breathe them in the air, we drink them in the water, and we're exposed to them within a variety of different types of foods. It's an incredibly pervasive material. It's something that not only harms the aquatic animals, but it's also very disruptive to our health as well. And it's a very critical emerging public health concern as it's been found in the human bloodstream, vital organs, and even the placenta of fetuses. So when we've been discussing how it impacts local communities, I work with the Green Task Force with the City of Detroit. And this is something that we are very interested in doing citywide in Detroit, is to ban single-use plastics. And we understand too that it's going to be a culture shift, and it's going to be something that not only is going to probably take some phases and some easing into it, but it's also going to benefit the health of those individuals, of the constituents in the community. So it's an environmental justice community, has a significant more amount of litter than most other communities, and the majority of that litter is single-use plastic, as about 40 to 50% of the plastics that are manufactured are single-use. So they're not meant to be recycled, they're not meant to be reused, they're meant to be tossed after you use them for a few minutes. So we definitely urge you to pass House Bill 4359 and help support the health of the constituents, and just allow local governments to have the ability to regulate these materials as they see fit to benefit their communities and the environment as a whole. So I appreciate your time, and we urge you to pass House Bill 4359. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Rep. Shriver?
Can you clarify real quick how giving local communities the license to increase taxes on groceries will help the life of a baby in its mother's womb?
Rep. Shriver, with all due respect, you've asked that question before and it's already been answered. This does not levy a tax. Local governments can decide if they want to create a tax or not. This does not require them to. Do you have a new question?
I don't believe I asked about the life of a child in its mother's womb before, so that this is a different question. She
It
mentioned
has the same answer. So
it does?
find a new question, or let's move on. We don't have time for this.
So I can't ask that question?
You've already asked it. This does not levy a tax.
I don't believe I did ask that question.
I'm not playing these games. We're moving on. Do you have another question?
No.
Representative Pies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was wondering, it sounds like you're targeting Detroit. If I understand correctly, Washtenaw County was interested in something like this some years back. But I'm wondering what your support is, or what the support is for this throughout the state. Are there other cities you know that are firmly against it, or other cities that are very much for it? Or how do you, if this were to pass, or even if it weren't, how would these other cities feel about that?
I don't think, I mean, my sense is I don't think if you all pass, if this bill is signed into law, I don't think we'll see, 80 cities tomorrow start regulating plastic pollution. But I do think that there is a lot of concern at the local level around what do we do with these plastic bags. I mean, it's a huge issue that local governments are dealing with, and so I think there are conversations happening across the state just around how do we manage this waste stream, and are there ways we can reduce it on the front end as opposed to dealing with it on the back end. And so I think that's why, Sam lives in Hamtramck and has been involved really closely in local Detroit area recycling and waste management issues, and that's why she sort of referenced the Detroit Green Task Force. But I think these are conversations that happen across the state because this is a very live issue that local governments are having to deal with.
Okay. And last question, if we can make it a little bit quick, Rep. Preston.
Thank you, Chair. I'm old enough to remember, and I was a bagger at a grocery store when the plastic bags came about. And back then, it was all about saving the trees, lessening the burden on the landfills. Paper bags have 140 pounds and 7,000 cubic inches of volume per 1,000 bags. Plastic bags, 15 pounds, 1,000 cubic inches. So that was the rationale back then for the transition to plastic. But the thing that I'm really the most worried about is the auxiliary containers. Meals on Wheels, there are so many aspects of society that rely on time and temperature control, sealability, and transport. The vast majority of my adult life was in food and beverage. And a lot of these containers that are at risk are really relied upon by the general public for the safe storage and transport of ready-to-eat food.
I would just say, and I know you want to jump in, I would just say that I think, these are, if this law or if this bill were signed into law, these are very real conversations that local governments could be having, right? Like, it's not like we're enforcing a ban tomorrow. There's a lot of deliberation that happens at the local level when they're developing these ordinances, and I think they could take, I trust our local officials and our state officials to be taking these issues into account when they're considering adopting local ordinances. So I hear you, but I think those are also things that local governments can grapple with.
And there's a variety of different solutions that can be discussed at the local level. Like, it doesn't have to be paper or plastic. There are other solutions that can be adopted and, brought in with that behavior change piece, along with some educational components. So, and I mean, there's...
And unfortunately, folks, we do have to move on. We have to take some votes, and we have another bill. We have to move on. I'm really sorry. We can follow up afterwards. I can get everyone's contact information. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We do have some cards to read in. Not wishing to speak and opposing the bill, we have Matthew Miner of Midwest Independent Retailers Association, Michael Limo from the Michigan Chamber, Jamie Deshane from the Michigan Chemistry Council, Carlos Gutierrez from Consumer Health Products Association, Tim Langolds from NFIB, and Derek, I always struggle with your name, and I'm so sorry, Derek, Bajma from the Michigan Soft Drink Association. I'm sorry. And then, not wishing to speak and supporting the bill, we have Mike Spence from the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments, Horst Schmidt from the UP Governmental Council, Judy Allen from the Michigan Township Association, Jen Rigtrink, thank you for the pronunciation, from the Michigan Municipal League, and Blake Goodman from the Humane Society of the United States. Thank you, everyone. We will be taking this issue back up in the future. Next up, we are going to be voting on Senate Bill 26, which was sponsored by Senator Chang. We heard testimony last week. We do have an H1 substitute being offered by Representative Shannon. Would you like to discuss your substitute briefly?
Yeah, briefly. Happily worked with the sponsor, stakeholders, and the department. And so that we did get a couple changes in here in the sub. The first one would take the 30% that was going to go to the department to Eagle down to 20%, and that 20% can only be used to administer the fund, and then also have some investments in air quality testing. So it takes away that incentive to try and get more fines, and then it also adds a representative to industry with the background in the environment. So I think that covers the three things that it changes.
And are you moving your sub?
Yes.
All right, Representative Shannon moves his sub. Madam Clerk, can you please call the vote?
On the motion of adopting the substitute, Chair Putsky.
Yes.
Representatives Hill.
Yes.
Shannon.
Yes.
Arbit.
Yes.
McFall.
Yes.
Pies.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Preston.
Yes.
Shriver.
No.
Madam Chair, you have 8 yeas, 1 nay, 0 pass. The substitute H1 is adopted.
Thank you very much. And Vice Chair Martin, do you have a substitute that you're?
Yes, Madam Chair. We have to insert line 6 and renumber everything below that or on page 4. Just that every public commission standard terminology, what identifies the director can appoint, majority of members for a quorum, and the Open Meetings Act type things, typical things that would be in a public commission.
Okay. And you move your substitute?
I move that.
Okay.
As an amendment to the substitute.
Amendment. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
On adopting the amendment, Chair Putsky.
No.
Representatives Hill.
No.
Shannon.
No.
Arbit.
No.
McFall.
No.
Pies.
No.
Martin.
Yes.
Preston.
Yes.
Shriver.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 3 yeas, 6 nays, 0 pass. The amendment is not adopted.
Thank you very much. There being no further amendments, I will take a motion to report SB 26 as substitute H1 with recommendation. Motion made by Rep. Arbit. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Reporting recommendation, Chair Putsky.
Yes.
Representatives Hill.
Yes.
Shannon.
Yes.
Arbit.
Yes.
McFall.
Yes.
Pies.
Yes.
Martin.
No.
Preston.
No.
Shriver.
No.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 3 nays, 0 passes. Senate Bill 26 is reported recommendation as substitute H1.
Great. Thank you very much. We have an additional card that just came in for HB 4359, not wishing to testify, but in opposition is Patrick Harrington from Blue Triton Brands. Next up, we are going to vote on Senate Bills 103 through 105. I do have a card here from Joyce Janicki, who is wishing to speak in opposition to the bill. Joyce, if you would like to come up, but keep your testimony to 2 minutes, I would appreciate that. Okay, she might be in overflow. I'll give her a second. While we're waiting, her opposition is on Senate Bill 105. So we're going to take the vote for Senate Bill 103 with recommendation. Oh, never mind. She came just in time. That's okay. I figured. That's all right. Ms. Janicki, if you can keep your testimony to about 2 minutes, I would appreciate it. Thank you. No, the red button in front of you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, now, okay. All right, I wanted to strongly urge this committee to oppose Senate Bill 105. I am very strongly against giving the Natural Resources Commission any more authority than they already have. The Natural Resources Commission, as you know, is a 7-member body appointed by the governor with the consent and advice of the Senate. It, at the current time and for many years in the past, is not a fair and just body. It is made up of special interest groups that include hunting, fishing, trapping, and no other opinions regarding wildlife are welcome in this commission. And I speak from years of attending commission meetings. Commission meetings are very sparsely attended for several reasons. Number one, hardly anybody in the state knows what the Natural Resources Commission is, and they have no idea of the powers the Natural Resources Commission has over wildlife and fish. And another reason is their meetings are held on Thursday in the middle of the day. Who can make those meetings? They're not Zoomed. So a lot of people's opinions, if they do know a meeting is occurring.
Ms. Janicki, I apologize. We were not planning on taking any additional testimony on this bill. So if you can wrap it up in the next 30 seconds or so, I know it's not long.
Oh, you're not taking up 105?
We are, but we took testimony last week. So I wasn't planning on anyone else giving testimony.
Oh.
So it's not in the schedule. So if you
Okay,
can wrap up
then,
your comments.
yes, basically, because it is not a fair and just body, and because it doesn't represent the majority of opinions of Michigan citizens on wildlife, I do not believe it should be given this any more authority than it already has. The membership has got to be reconstituted.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now we are going to take a motion to report Senate Bill 103 with recommendation. That motion is made by Rep. Pies. Madam Clerk, can you please call the vote?
On the motion to report, Chair Pudsky.
Yes.
Representatives Hill.
Yes.
Shannon.
Yes.
Arvid.
Yes.
McFall.
Yes.
Pies.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Preston.
Yes.
Shriver.
No.
Madam Chair, you have 8 yeas, 1 nay, 0 passed. House Senate Bill 103 is reported with recommendation as amended.
Thank you very much. I will now take a motion to report Senate Bill 104 with recommendation. Motion made by Rep. Shannon. Madam Clerk, will you please call the vote?
On the motion to report, Chair Pudsky.
Yes.
Representatives Hill.
Yes.
Shannon.
Yes.
Arvid.
Yes.
McFall.
Yes.
Pies.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Preston.
Yes.
Shriver.
No.
Madam Chair, you have 8 yeas, 1 nay, 0 passed. Senate Bill 104 is reported with recommendation.
Committee will stand at ease. Committee will come to order. Next up, I will take a motion to report Senate Bill 105 with recommendation. Motion made by Representative McFall. Madam Clerk, will you please call the vote?
On motion to report, Chair Potsky.
Yes.
Representatives Hill.
Yes.
Shannon.
Yes.
Arvid.
Yes.
McFall.
Yes.
Pies.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Preston.
Yes.
Schreiber.
No.
Madam Chair, you have 8 yeas, 1 nay, 0 pass. Senate Bill 105, your report of recommendation.
Thank you very much. At this time, I would like to take testimony on House Bill 4325, which is sponsored by Representative Scott. If you'd like to come forward and speak, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair Patsky and members of the committee for this opportunity to speak about House Bill 4325, the legislation that I'm proud to sponsor as a champion for improving the health and well-being of all Michiganders and protecting our environment. Before I get into statistics regarding illegal dumping in the city of Detroit and also the state of Michigan, I want to add a little personal context. Growing up as a child of the 60s and 70s and 80s, I can remember Detroit being very pristine, not plagued with all the dumping that we have today. My constituents in the city of Detroit are very disturbed in House District 7 about the level of dumping that's occurring. So I just wanted to add that. I'm disturbed by it, they're disturbed by it, and it has not been that way that I saw growing up. It's very different today. Let me give you some statistics regarding that. According to the Michigan Department of Transportation, illegal dumping is a very extremely costly problem. In 2002, the fiscal year, the state spent nearly $7.7 million for workers to pick up trash along state highways and roads. This figure does not include the cost of road maintaining by municipalities. House Bill 4325 will hold violators who commit environmental crimes accountable with stiffer penalties and increased fines. Protecting our environment is paramount in keeping our ecosystem and ourselves healthy. I want Michiganders and my colleagues to understand the problem with illegal dumping is really, truly serious. Illegal dumping can have disastrous effects on our water system, our soil quality, not to mention it can expose Michiganders to problems like pests and rats. Last year, during the fiscal year, Detroit Public Works Department reported the removal of 700 tons of trash and other debris from around Detroit each week. Each week. Last year, DPW reported cleaning up as many as 1,000 abandoned tires each week that were illegally dumped. Did you know that tires are dangerous and hazardous to our environment? And they also pose an attraction of infestation of pests and mosquitoes. In Michigan last year, we spent $680,000 in grants awarded to 92 communities to clean up 400,000 scrap tires. It's not only an eyesore when violators dump trash on abandoned or vacant lots or alongside a back road or highway and even the railroad tracks, but it's also costly, dangerous to Michiganders and the environment. So I really urge everyone in this committee to really consider everything I just said. I really want a crackdown on illegal dumping in Michigan, primarily in Detroit and House District 7, and I'm asking and urging your support of House Bill 4325 for the future of a cleaner and healthier environment. And I would also like to add, we do have people or entities that are in support of this, Environmental Great Lakes and Energy, which is EGLE, the Michigan Railroad Association, the Michigan Manufacturers Housing, RV, and Camping or Campground Association, the Michigan Environmental Council, and the Michigan Municipal League. I'm open to any questions that you may have, and thank you for allowing me to testify today in committee.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Rep. Scott? Okay, Mr. Martin.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a question. So, City of Flint, being in Genesee County, I don't represent City of Flint, but they have the same issues and dumping, and I read about it all the time. I see it when I drive through town. Increasing it to fines that are more of a criminal nature than civil if they don't pay the fines, does a criminal infraction then turn into jail time for anybody?
Not really. I think what's happening is they have a first and second violation, not any jail time.
Yeah, because they're having a hard time finding who these people are anyway. That's the big question, who is doing the dumping? So then who do they punish? And so that's a difficulty for me right there. But then the second part is, if they don't follow up, our jail's full. And this is another layer of another instance where we'd be throwing somebody in jail that's not doing bodily harm to somebody. It's bad for the community, but it's not bodily harm to
Well, it
somebody.
is bodily harm to the environment overall.
But
It could cause
when your
health
jail's full,
problems.
that's not a question. You know, you want to keep
And so
people.
what is
you
your
want to keep.
solution?
You want to keep.
excuse
That's
me.
why I just want to know. I'm just saying.
Okay.
I just don't know. By increasing this, we don't know who the offenders are anyway in Flint. That's what the newspapers are always talking about. Don't know who the offenders are. So I
Okay.
don't know who we're going to punish. Why that would work.
Well,
And
I
second
do-
of all, if we do catch them and they don't pay, do we throw them in jail to a full jail? It's adding another criminal offense to our system.
That well may be, but we need to eliminate the issue. And so I do know in Detroit that our neighborhood police officers are patrolling the areas more vigorously to help identify some of these offenders. And maybe they should think about doing that in Flint as well. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, testifying on this bill, we have John Kuhl, who is the president of the Michigan Railroad Association.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Last session, we supported this legislation as well. As stated by the representative, a lot of illegal dumping happens on railroad property. So we stand with the representative and hopefully members of the committee to make improvement in this area. So appreciate the time.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for John? No? All right. Thank you very much. And lastly, testifying virtually, we have Cynthia A. Johnson, who is on Zoom. If you can keep your testimony to about 2 or 3 minutes, I know it's an important issue, but we do have to head over to session soon, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and everybody. Thank you, Madam Helena Scott. I appreciate you championing this as I've been sharing many of the sites that we see of illegal dumping. I wish and I hope that there will be a consequence. If after dumping the 5th time, which should be a $15,000 fee, after dumping that many times, there should be a consequence of 90 days in jail. Much of the dumping that happens in the city of Detroit, and I'm sure in other communities, it doesn't happen by the people who live in those cities. I would think that, and not just think, but I've been informed by the city of Detroit that at least 3/4 of the dumping occur by people outside of our city. Much of it's from construction, real estate companies. We have a bad community actor as a business person in the city of Detroit who has hundreds of homes, who's a bad actor and constantly gets there's nothing to make him stop doing what he's doing. There's no consequences. And so I'm asking, because I championed this bill for 2 sessions? I'm asking, I'm begging, we are begging, all of us who have to live among, I won't say among trash, but it is among trash when you're dumping in our communities. We love our cities. We want to live peacefully and in peace and live like I used to live over 60 years ago when it was beautiful. I remember the good old days. Thank you, State Representative Helena Scott, for this. And thank you, Madam Chair and members, for indulging us.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions? All right, thank you very much. We do have some cards to read in on this. Not wishing to speak in support of the bill, Charlotte Jameson from the Michigan Environmental Council, Judy Allen from the Michigan Townships Association, Harrisana Richards from the Michigan Municipal League, Cress Semrenick from the Michigan League of Conservation Voters, Travis Boskell from Eagle, Carolyn Lethan from Michigan Manufacturers Association, and John Cool, who did testify from the Michigan Railroads Association. Having no absent members to excuse and seeing no further business before the committee stands adjourned. Thank you.